Hello, my name is David Vincenti, and I'm so happy to be joining you today in the Positively Poetry reading series. I'd like to thank Ethan Galvin and the Hoboken Public Library for the opportunity to join you today. I'd like to express my appreciation for the other poets who have participated in the series. I can't tell you what it means to be included in your company. Spring means so many wonderful things. The return of bright colors, the rebirth of the forsythia behind me, the return of baseball, always important in my family growing up and today. And of course, I can't forget that, give or take a few days, all three of my beautiful daughters were born in the spring. There's just so much good news at the beginning of this wonderful season. And so I'd like to begin with a poem called Getting the News. This poem first appeared in the Schuylkill Valley Journal. First, the rain-peppered stoop. In the driveway, the scratches of interrupted squirrels. Hypotenuse to the antenna, a web. Beyond the forsythia, the whisper of traffic. Around the rhododendron, two striped blimps the size of thumbs. One in purple dock, the other filled with buzz. Behind me, Ferrelise, loud, later, Red River Valley, louder. The smell of grass, of char, of cedar, of exhaust, the cool yellow bag, an accidental scrape on asphalt, the fractal pattern of a puddle splash. Contrails. On my finger, from somewhere, an inchworm. Now, I know many of you appreciate the sounds of the world coming back to life and the bright colors appearing all around us, but the truth is, that's not what I was raised with. Some of what comes to life in the spring, even today, is a bit of a surprise for me. And those unexpected colors and sounds and appearances of animals, still, they fill me with joy, but they are somewhat unexpected. To celebrate the pleasure of that surprise, here's a poem called Welcome, and this first appeared in the Rutherford Red Wheelbarrow. Welcome. Is there a word for the shocking yellow bud that comes without invitation between the rows of planted geraniums, that namelessly interrupts the calculated lines of zinnias? If you own the land, have pressed its warm fertility between your fingers, you might object, might fail to love what makes your garden different than it has been since you plunged that first spade head inside its ropes. You might name this intruder for a god of war, or a garbage-loving rodent, or an uncle with a crooked smile. But I am not a gardener. I am not a prince whose patio overlooks a topiary parade. I cannot identify the rake in the dark, nor spot the hoe hiding among the snow shovels. I am just another uneducated coward here among the bumblebees. And of this flower, I say, I did not plan for this, but this too is beautiful. Now, I'm sure you've been hearing the cars go by behind me as I record this, and truthfully, the sound of those cars is one of the things I associate with spring from my childhood. Because when the weather got nice like this, we would pile into the car, and we would leave our apartment or our duplex in the outer boroughs behind, and we would go in search of places to stretch out and enjoy the world coming back to its awakeness. So to celebrate those car rides, here's a poem called Interstate 80. Before the trees rediscover themselves, painting their craggy fingers yellow and green, the sky begins to blend black into blue. First ink, then indigo, then an inkling of earth turning us toward the sun. It is too early for sunrise, but too late to dream, and each mile makes clear a feature invisible just minutes before, a detail unaware it was hiding. Now, sparrows begin to overtake the crickets in another transition you cannot quite see. You are headed home, or making a start toward your new life. Maybe you are becoming known to someone new. The world is suddenly awash in change, every leaf emerging, every boundary fading, and you are awake. Keep moving. Now, I mentioned that all three of our daughters were born in the spring. And the process of becoming a father to three strong young women transformed me and continues to transform me every day. My chapbook, To the Ones Who Must Be Loved, is a collection of poems addressed to my three daughters. Hopefully, it gives them a sense of how they've changed me, and hopefully they see themselves represented in the pages, since I promised them that each of them is represented in the book. I'd like to do a few poems from To the Ones Who Must Be Loved. Comet. Daughter, like a crystallized piece of sky spun off from the star of your parents' love, you have started on your long path through the seeming disorder of the solar system. I set myself up as the center of this dance long enough ago to know the nature of the circles you'll travel through. The cloudy brightness of Venus, the unpredictable storms of Jupiter, the showy ornamentation of Saturn. I was once a traveling coldness with a fiery tail myself. And I know your trip will take you as far away as a thing can go and still be of this sky. I know I might lose you out there. So many things to buffet and draw. Montessori meteors, the planets in your playgroup. Just this morning, when we disagreed on the conditions that make snow possible, you told me I knew nothing, and another mile of space appeared between us. I don't know how many miles and years will pass before something pulls at you, makes you turn and seek the fire you came from. But when you mirror back the long axis of your leaving, I hope the momentum that love can have brings you each time around the heaven you are a piece of, the anchor you define with your orbit. Second child. Daughter, in the fledgling years of parenthood, you learn that with memories, sharing is more valuable than proof. That you cannot be part of what you take in through a peephole, and I offer this as the reason there are no photographs of you. As for the colorful familiarity of your wardrobe, I can only ask if you'd rather we spent more time shopping, keeping your energetic body strapped to the cargo carrier with the dozens of smiling fish. In short, you are a typical second child, and we are just typical parents with love and good intentions overflowing the coffers that previously held such delicacies as time and sleep and flexible spending. This may offer no comfort in the decades to come, but you can be sure your sister will attest to the attention you got, even if the records kept should not. Just one more from To the Ones Who Must Be Loved. This is called The Good Thing About Rain. I admit, I almost hoped you'd cry. that you'd need me to lead you in, to stay while you traded in your fear for some yellow blocks, some juice, and your own place on the line. But you, the daredevil sister, have been ready for this for months. This is our last first day of school. True, you'll enter other grades, get new teachers, ride the bus, but those are all next steps. Like walking up an escalator, even if you stopped, you'd still be moving away from us. So I'm glad for this squall that settled in at 7:30, for the dollar store umbrella that keeps you close as I walk you toward a door that is opening already as I extend an empty hand. Now, rain is certainly something else we should celebrate about spring, April showers and all that. So here, to continue that celebration, is a poem simply titled Rain. I like, before the loudness of the storm, to let myself lose focus on what's near, to stare through houses, blend with things I think I know. I like to stretch my skin to feel the drops, their short, transparent lives concluded in a spot of coolness that might be pleasure in relief from Jersey heat, that might be pain as a remnant of a slightly thawed nor'easter. If God wants me to be a canvas, if poems long to find me opening away from their world into this, then here is the one place I might be perfect. Hands upward toward a sky that might hold nothing, but might make sense of all my senses. Here I am, empty, startled, party to the downpour. My full-length collection, A Measure of This World, Galileo's Dialogue with the Universe, is a story of the life of Galileo Galilei. Now, most people remember Galileo as the scientist or the astronomer, perhaps as the father of modern engineering, and they would be right to remember him in that way. But Galileo was more than that. He was also a keen observer, a wonderful conversationalist, and an appreciator of art in all its forms. Near the end of his life, when he was going blind, he was visited by many of the famous philosophers and artists of his generation. In this poem, I imagine Galileo speaking to the French poet Marc-Antoine Gérard de Saint-Amand, who visited Galileo while he was under house arrest in the town of Arcetri. Sundays with Saint-Amand. Friend, take me to the trellised chapel that leads to the cathedral of the garden. As we shuffle through the cluttered parlor, tell me of Helen, that combustible flower, of Delilah, that dark rose, of Eve, and the fruit she never names, even with all the knowledge in the world. As we step into the sun like a sailor from below decks, weave me the end of an epic, a hero's homecoming. The start is not important. Once outside, among the 100 mingling fragrances, mixed but distinguishable, help me pick some young figs, so we can savor their complexity, flesh and seeds, soft and hard. Two men invoking our memories in silence, meditating in the midst of the bees' coarse canto to creation. Now, we've talked about some of the more commonly considered signs of spring, but I'd like to change things up a bit and talk about two under-considered creatures that, to me, are no less spring than the blooms and the robins. This next poem is called Obad, and it first appeared in US 1 worksheets. Confused by another spring thaw, the geese in noisy V's drive east across inhospitable fields of muddy slush, their motionless heads distanced from their frantic flapping by eternities of elegant neck. Maybe instinct pushes them, or the tattering surface of a lake's icy blanket calls them, or they flee a den of insomniac foxes. It doesn't matter. They will fly until their wings refuse to work, then seek anything flat and just a little green. I envy them, unafraid nuisances, for their self-perpetuating purpose. I want to honk across the sky that way, trusting a spirit I do not understand, boisterously proclaiming nothing but my need to proclaim, my need to rise. Now, I'm willing to bet that these next creatures don't hold special places in your hearts, but I can promise you that for my friends and I a long time ago, these guys, they were spring. This is called gypsy moths. They were as plentiful as fistfights along the street that was our universe in the years when the trees outnumbered the hydrants. The larvae were best, fuzzy black and green girl scarers. We'd set them at the center of a sidewalk square, yell go, and watch for one to reach the edge. A directionless race of almost a yard, it often would take 10 minutes and would end with a vengeful preteen god thinning his herd with the treads of his keds. Only those with the rapidest undulations would earn berths of soft Scott towels in the finest shoeboxes, honored spots beside our sun-faded sleds to rest for the next day's Olympics. In reality, they rarely ran again, those unaware winners perfectly confined for the local frogs and cats, though we always assumed escape, trained like all boys to equate escape with victory. But even anticipating that abandonment, thoughts of the coming jilt invading dreams of races our own feet might win. We still stashed silent hope in those misunderstood caterpillars, bestowed what honor we knew how for as long as the season's insects lasted, until the last of our chances became still or took to the sky. As I record these poems today, the tiny island nation of St. Vincent is struggling because of recent volcanic activity on the island. Now, I share an interest in and something of an affection for the island, mainly because I have a friend I've worked with for a long time who is from St. Vincent and who has many friends and members of her family still there, and I worry for their safety. Also because I've learned about a species of gecko that is native to the island, and because it is from St. Vincent, the gecko and I share a last name. It is known as Spherodactylus vincenti. This is called upon learning there's a lizard that shares my name. Only the one with the less encumbered heart was named for the saint. But somehow still our surnames have become the same. This explains my strange allegiance to the lizards on my father-in-law's Florida walk, small enough to be scared by my daughter's invasive affection. But then I am also scared when my daughters place their happiness wholly on me. Do they know any more of their father than they do of the skittering quick tails that disappear into the landscaped palm leaves? Perhaps that explains the serendipity in our names. Unimpeded by thought or worry, we might both treat my daughters the same, be visible, give some small joy, disappear. Well, I cannot grow back a tail, but I can clothe myself in action and discover my best identity. I am a noisy lizard with the power to love. And now, in what must seem the most amazing of coincidences, I discover looking back through my journals that that's not the only poem I've ever written about a volcanic eruption in the spring. Those of you of a certain age and who've lived in the United States may remember Mount St. Helens and its eruption in the spring of 1980, and how that summer there were some unusual things that were blamed on the volcano. This is called Prayer to St. Helens. That spring, I learned everything is fragile. Favorite mugs, bicycles, mountaintops, all succumb to forces other than love, to relentless enemies like gravity and ice and earthquakes, and Paulie Caputo, who dumped Park Place into a sump hole rather than pay me. That spring, St. Helens erupted as often as my father. I was 13, and in those months began to wheeze like an accordion left too long in an attic, to make audible each breath, as if hearing myself was proof I had not failed. I don't recall the first squeak, and it was gone before my first kiss, but for those few weeks, I didn't need to announce when I entered a room. Thank you, St. Helens, for afflicting me with a fear I could name, for ash to blame and lungs I could will into action. Thank you, distant peak, for touching me, aiming me at Earth's faults over my own, for imperfection on a planetary scale to put my own unlocked backyard into perspective. Thank you for being larger than me and foreign to me, for being grand and ancient, newsworthy and broken. Well, I mentioned that for me, baseball is as much a sign of spring as anything. So to finish our time together today, here are two poems about baseball and two of my favorite men. To get us in the mood, let's go Mets. This is called Rusty Staub's Last Home Run. Almost straight away, maybe a step towards left. Nothing special to him about number 292, 15 weeks before the end of a career spent going with the pitch to send men home. It was the 8th inning when he put the Mets ahead and made the cheap seats happy and hoarse. I was holding Melissa's hand and didn't even mind when Mookie made a quiet third out. A half hour later, the Mets had lost, and I knew Rusty's playing days were dwindling, along with the Mets' postseason chances and my time with these new friends. But that night, I was still in love, and everything was right. One pitch could turn everything around. One swing could find me new life beyond the fence. Now, I suppose, like most men, memories of baseball are intertwined with memories of my father. So let's end with a poem called Baseball with My Father. His mitt fit like a gardening glove, a child's toy from Kresge's that even his small hands filled like pimento in an undergrown olive, restrung with shoelace and twine so it would hold together when the tennis ball struck. Mine was newer, but seemed less useful, less likely to capture a line drive off the bat of John G., the Jerry Grote of schoolyard ball. For that little bit of leather, he was named official shortstop, fielder for all teams, arbiter, maker of sides to guarantee a competitive game. My friends never questioned his objectivity, and he threw me out with joy equal to any other putout. Street baseball retired with his knees, but even now, decades beyond his death, I still keep his mitt on a lightly used shelf in the garage, a shelter for spiders, a paperweight in a world without wind. It sits like a prop from an old play, a fable with a moral you only understand much, much later. I thank you for spending some time with me today. Again, I'm grateful to Ethan Galvin and the Hoboken Public Library. I hope you've enjoyed this little talk, and I hope you've enjoyed all the readings in the Positively Poetry reading series. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you again.